Hey, what's going on? Okay, so right now we're going to go through the JavaScript version of the DNAtoRNA function on Codewars. The way I like to do it usually is instead of writing directly inside of Codewars, I usually actually copy and paste the function into something called a jsfiddle.net. Why do I like jsfiddle? Because it gives me the ability to write JavaScript directly here and have a console log for its output right next to it. And it's a nice little tool where you can actually save and run and so on and so forth, and actually share with other people. Okay, so we're going to go through two different solutions that are possible for this function, as well as first we're going to start with writing their pseudocode. Okay, so like I said, I like to go ahead and post the actual function into a JSFiddle and also a few tests that I'll write in advance. Okay, so we have our tests, and let's say the first test is going to be TTTT. So that should, of course, we know, return UUUU. And then let's just do one other one. Let's say JSTT. Okay, so that should return GC, UU, and this should, of course, return UUUU. Okay, now let's actually go ahead and write our function. So this function takes, first let's write all our pseudocode, all the stuff that we know for sure. So the first thing we know for sure is that takes function takes a string. Okay, that's a given. Okay, function takes a string. And what do we want to do? We want to loop through the string and check each letter. If letter, so right, if the letter is not if the letter is equal, so if the letter is equal to a T, replace that letter with U, okay? Else, so we're kind of like writing a pseudocode of our conditional, else keep that letter, okay? So how do we actually replace a letter and keep a letter? What we can do is, before we loop, let's initialize variable new string that will hold the new string. Okay. All right. So, and after we actually check each letter, let's return new string. New string. What is new string going to be? It's going to hold our. It's pretty much going to be an empty string in the beginning, and then each time we go through a letter, we'll either add that letter, if it's not a T, to a new string, and if it is a T, we'll add a U. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually do that. So let new str equal to an empty string. Okay, why do we use let and not const? Because new string is going to constantly change with every iteration of the loop. That's why we need a let, because it needs the ability to change. Now let's actually make a loop. Okay, so for let I equal to 0, and then I is less than or equal to DNA.length minus 1, I plus plus, and let's make our actual loop. Okay, inside of our loop, if you remember, we have a conditional. So if letter is equal to T, replace that letter with a U. Okay, so let's actually write that. If DNA I at index I is equal to T, then what do we want to put into new string? We want new str to be to add a T, sorry, a U instead, if it's equal to a T. Else, what do we want to do? new str should add that specific letter because it's not a T, right? So we want to add DNA of string. Okay. Now after we're done with our for loop, we can actually return new str. Okay. Now let's go ahead and, apologies. Okay. Now we can actually run this, and we didn't get anything. Oh, because we did return instead of console log. That's the only difference between JS Fiddle and Codewars, is that here a return would work. Actually, they want you to have a return, but in JS Fiddle they need you to console log because this is a console. So console.log. Okay, and now let's try that again. I'm going to put return new str in comments here because that's what you need to put into Codewars. And let's run everything. And that works correctly. As you see, UUU, GCUU, right? Let's actually copy and paste this into Codewars and make sure that it goes through correctly. Don't forget that we actually, instead of console logging, need to return it. Okay, so I'll comment that line and attempt, and everything works perfectly. Great. Now let's look at another solution. Another easier solution is, instead of doing all this looping, what we can do is, let's go ahead and treat DNA, right? Let's console log. You know what? Let's console log DNA, okay? Just so we know so far what we're dealing with. Okay, DNA is that. And what if we can actually treat DNA into splitting it into an array? So what if we say console log DNA dot split? Okay, let's just do it like that. Let's split it based on nothing. Okay, it's going to give us an array of each and every single letter. Okay, but what we can do is we can actually split at specific things, right? So for example, if we had spaces in between these letters, we can tell our split to split at spaces, okay? And what would happen is it would split TTT here, but the GCTT, it would keep as one array, as one item in an array because there's no spaces in between, okay? So we can actually use that to our advantage. Instead of splitting at spaces, we can split at T's, and then we can actually get rid of those T's and replace them with U's. So for example, if we split at T here, what's going to happen? The first one is going to give us back a bunch of empty an array of a bunch of empty elements. Why? Because each and every single element in that array was a T. And the GCTT is going to give us a GC, right? And then split at the T's, right? So the last two elements were T's. Now, what can we do? We can also take advantage of the join, okay? If we join, we can do the same exact idea, and we can join wherever there are separate elements in an array. We can join them with, let's say for example, a comma. So let's join with a comma. Okay, what happens? So it's going to give us 4 commas, or it's going to give us GC comma comma. Well, what if instead of comma we say let's join with T? Sorry, well, let's join with U, right? Wherever there's a split, and the split, don't forget, happens because of a T, we can instead put a U over there and join with a U. Well, essentially it gives us exactly what we want to happen, right? So essentially what do? We split at T, and instead of T we put in its place a U. That's all. Very simple. So let's actually test this inside of Let's test this inside of Codewars, and let's attempt. Oh, my apologies, I console logged it instead of returning it. Return, attempt, and that worked. Okay, great.